The Misadventures of a Time-Traveling Llama. Doug McAllister wasn't the type of guy to go looking for adventure. In fact, if you asked him, he'd tell you that his greatest achievement in life was training llamas to spin in circles for treats. Not exactly a Nobel Prize-worthy endeavor. Doug had retired from llama training a few years ago, and now he spent most of his time binge-watching crime documentaries and occasionally giving his favorite llama, Señor Fluffington, a nice back rub. Life was simple. It was good. Then, one Thursday, things got weird. Doug had just finished his third bowl of cereal for the day, his guilty pleasure, don't judge, when his neighbor, Dave, came knocking on his door. Dave was one of those guys who always had new things, gadgets, contraptions, the latest, revolutionary, technology, and he couldn't wait to show them off. Today, Dave had something special. You gotta try this, Doug. It's the future of relaxation, he said, holding up what looked like an absurdly fancy massage chair. I'm good, Dave. I've got llamas to train, Doug replied, not looking up from his cereal. Oh, come on, just sit in it for 5 minutes, it's got technology, Dave said, with the kind of enthusiasm Doug usually reserved for his llamas. With a sigh, Doug put down his spoon, pushed Señor Fluffington off his lap, and trudged over to the chair. It looked like something a billionaire would buy to impress their guests, but Doug figured he had 5 minutes to kill. Fine, Doug grumbled as he sat down and leaned back. The chair immediately sprang to life. At first, it was relaxing, kneading his back like a cat on a warm pillow. But then, without warning, the chair jerked. It vibrated. It hummed. It was as if some mechanical demon had decided that Doug's spine was a perfect target for a full-body assault. Whoa! Doug yelled, trying to escape the vibrating hell machine. But before he could even stand up, the chair gave one final, violent shake, and then, like the world's worst roller coaster, everything went black. When Doug opened his eyes, he was no longer in his cozy living room. He was in a desert. Not the kind of desert you visit on vacation, no, this was the kind of desert where ancient, wrinkled monuments towered above you, and everything smelled like sand and confusion. Doug blinked twice. This was not his home. This was not even his time. Where the hell am I? Doug mumbled, standing up, his head spinning. And then he heard it. A familiar sound. A sound that made him groan with the kind of regret only a retired llama trainer could feel. Señor Fluffington. Doug whispered. Sure enough, standing proudly atop a pile of ancient stone blocks was Señor Fluffington himself, looking exactly like he did when Doug first trained him, fluffy, judgmental, and oblivious to all things logical. But this time, there was a problem. Señor Fluffington wasn't just being fluffy in Doug's living room. No, Señor Fluffington was standing in the middle of ancient Egypt, in front of a massive pyramid, staring at the bustling crowd of Egyptians like he was about to drop a mic and walk off. Well, this is bad, Doug said, rubbing his temples. This is really bad. Doug tried to get his bearings. It wasn't hard to tell he wasn't in Kansas anymore, or even the 21st century. The Egyptians were walking around in linen tunics, carrying massive stones, while weirdly enough, a bunch of priests in gold robes were staring at Señor Fluffington like they'd just witnessed the second coming of something. He wasn't sure what. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that his favorite llama, Señor Fluffington, was prancing around like he owned the place. I didn't sign up for this, Doug muttered. You know what? Let's just go with it. You're a god now, Señor Fluffington. You've always had a god complex. Señor Fluffington, in response, gave Doug the kind of look that only a llama could give, a mix of smug indifference and complete disdain for everything around him. It was like being judged by a woolly, profligate philosopher. But before Doug could figure out a plan, a group of priests, led by a particularly pompous-looking guy with a gold necklace and a headdress that looked suspiciously like it belonged to a fallen Roman emperor, marched up to him. "Who are you and what is this creature?" the lead priest demanded, pointing at Señor Fluffington. "Ah, he's a god?" Doug said, unsure of what was even coming out of his mouth. "A god?" The priest looked unimpressed. "He is a llama." "Yes, exactly. A divine llama," Doug said, growing more desperate. "You see, the gods sent him to bless your pyramid-building efforts." The priest raised an eyebrow. "A llama to bless our pyramid?" Yeah, exactly," Doug said, doing his best to sound convincing. "He's a very magical llama. He's got powers. You should probably bow to him now, just in case." Señor Fluffington, who was now thoroughly uninterested in Doug's sales pitch, wandered off toward the pyramid, completely ignoring the awkward stares from the priests. "Right. Of course," Doug muttered. "Because that makes sense. A llama on a mission from the gods. I should have just stuck to my garden of weeds." The priest, still unimpressed, nodded at Doug. "If he is a god, he will need to perform a miracle. Can he build the pyramid? Or perhaps summon the sun?" Doug had no idea how to summon the sun, but he wasn't going to let that stop him. "Of course he can. Watch!" Doug yelled. He turned to Señor Fluffington, hoping that his years of llama training had imbued the animal with some form of divine wisdom. "Señor Fluffington, perform a miracle!" Doug shouted, probably a little too loudly. The llama, completely unbothered, looked back at Doug, blinked slowly, and then casually spat on the priest's robe. The priest gasped, horrified. "The god spits upon me." Doug sighed. "Well, it's not exactly what I had in mind, but sure, why not? He is a god." The priests, now convinced that Doug had somehow unleashed the divine wrath of a truly petty deity, began to back away. And just like that, Señor Fluffington, the reluctant time-traveling llama, became a very unwilling god in ancient Egypt. Doug, on the other hand, was left standing there, wondering how on earth he was going to get his llama back to the present time. And, of course, what kind of trouble Señor Fluffington would get into while he was busy being worshipped by a bunch of confused Egyptians. As for Señor Fluffington, he wasn't really worried about the future or the past. He was just glad to be at the top of the food chain once again. Doug, however, was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, llamas were secretly running the world.